But I am the Sappy Sorcerer, and welcome to Sappy Stories. Today, with a special impromptu episode. If you are tuning in expecting musings with Maddox, that will be coming on tonight at 9 o'clock. Not immediately following this broadcast, but following this. I still am not the most comfortable doing lives. Especially by myself, I feel like I tend to rant, and sometimes I'm so far in a conversation, I forget what I was talking about in the first place. So I definitely want to work on that, at least with some of these lives, because when you're editing, it's easy to cut a significant amount of the ums and ohs. But so many of the content creators always talk about getting comfortable talking on camera. I've been comfortable talking on camera. It's just having a conversation with yourself. Because usually, if you're on camera acting, there's other people that you're communicating with. But you are looking at a piece of glass and an iris and having a emotional response. I'm not sure, do people tend to prefer to look at themselves in the reflection? Or do they like to look at the lens, giving some sort of eye contact? I prefer the latter, just because it does have that feel. Anyway, so on Substack, still relatively new to this platform. Been on here for about a couple of months. I was persuaded to come on by Maddox Clausinger. I co-host with him Wednesdays at 9 o'clock, Musings with Maddox. Today we'll be talking about Martin Scorsese. Martin Scorsese happened to do a couple of documentaries on Bob Dylan, so today at some point I will probably be talking about Bob Dylan. Yes, this is a Bob Dylan tarot book. It's a Bob Dylan tarot deck. They have it. It's not that bad either. And Bob Dylan is a writer, of course. He has the Nobel Prize in Literature, and he also has an Oscar. These are two awards. They can mean everything, they can mean absolutely nothing. He happens to have both of them. If you're into the cardology, or card science, as some people refer to it, he is an 8 of clubs, Mr. Dylan, and that is a fixed card. A very important force of nature. If you think of the 8 of clubs, you automatically think of the 8 of wands, and that's a communication card. Constant communication. Always think of bubbles on the phone, going back and forth, back and forth. So with Mr. Dylan, what I enjoy most about him over every single artist is, one, the duration he's been performing and composing, writing, all of that, probably since 13, 1940s, 1950s. There's recordings as far back. Also, he works a lot in threes, trilogies, I've noticed. They're not always thematic, but a lot of times you'll see his style. And he's someone that consistently rearranged his songs and still does to this day for live performance. Anytime you see Bob, if it's earlier in the tour, you listen to some of the live tracks, half the time people need to figure out what the song is before they start clapping. Because usually they'll hear the beat and then it's a little bit different. It might take them a few minutes to figure out, but once he starts singing the lyrics, that's when they get it. So he writes lyrics, and people have covered his songs. And for people who really don't like Bob Dylan or can't stand his voice, which is a lot of people, I try to minimize them if I'm ever doing playlists for other people. Just because I enjoy it, but there's plenty of things I can imagine just stopping a party, stopping it just dead. So I try not to, those are more spiritual and individual listens, I would say. So today I kind of wanted to just get all this Bob Dylan rant out of my system, hopefully in this live. If you are joining me, I don't think anyone's joining me. That's the good thing about doing these impromptus. I don't have to feel too self-conscious of boring people. I just gotta entertain myself. Anyway, so on Substack, this is a writer's platform. I wrote a short story yesterday, and I was pretty proud. It had been, I don't know how many years since I've written a short story. I've written poems and epic poems, maybe the length of a short story in some of them, but it was particularly freeing. I find it easier to write to people sometimes versus writing to a mass or write a story. However, I've found it much easier lately to tap into that other world that artists so much think to go into before they get there. There's like a lot of these celebrity requests which seem ridiculous, which I don't think I'm on that level of weirdness. But in terms of preparation for writing, writers' routines, they go for a walk in the morning. Maddox speaks a lot about Stephen King and his methodologies. Stephen King's, in terms of that cardology, is the writer's card, and he's a three of clubs. So in the club suit, which is knowledge and brain, wisdom, power, or if you think of that, wands of creativity, sometimes there is this need to express. And both Bob Dylan and Stephen King have been around for decades. Both have been a voice of their generation, shall we say. Stephen King books, Stephen King book adaptations at least were a huge part of my life. A lot of them from the 80s specifically. John Carpenter did Christine. Stanley Kubrick did The Shining. David Cronenberg did. It's gonna come to me. It's gonna come to me. What is it? What is it? Dead Zone. It was a TV show. I had to think of the TV show to get back to the movie. But what's so cool about these writers is that even back then, when you think about when they were writing and what they were surrounded by, this is what they were producing. And all of us are in what I like to call this new vaudeville, which pretty much similar to old vaudeville, pre-film studios of the 20th century. We'll just say the 20th century. Acts would go around and everyone kind of had their own shtick, shall we say. And a lot of the vaudeville acts were recorded in the 1890s, 1900s, and these were replayed and reissued. And eventually, the novelty of seeing these on film put the actual people out of business. They would make their way into the film industry, music industry. It would just be a different badge of honor of just coming up from that style of entertainment. I would say wrestling is definitely from that element of vaudeville. And the way we're going with, you'll even notice with collaborations, now everything's a collaboration. And there's nothing wrong with that. You get to see multiple artists and they're mutually trying to help each other out in order to better promote their work to a wider audience as well as have a good time. There's so many talks of what we've learned, especially what we've learned in through cinema, through literature, everything in the 20th century, about art, and it's going to be so big. It's going to be this giant monopoly, and creatively speaking, that has been happening. This consolidation of creative power that they have right now, especially. I remember when Disney was buying all of the Disney bought Pixar, Disney bought Marvel, and they had Mickey with the Infinity Gauntlet. And we flash forward to today, it's not the same story. Although Spider-Man coming out of the park is good for Disney, even though it's a Sony-owned property, it's still good for Disney. It's a Disney character that is in a Sony movie. The stories that we are currently telling, we're in a change, and you keep. I like the fact that Bob Dylan and Stephen King are both still writing. Bob Dylan's still touring in his 80s. These are people that I think a lot of us aspire to be, and it's good that they exist, but it might also be like a curse that they just have to expel this information. They learned at a very young age what exactly it is that they want to do. They were able to tap into it, find a market, grow, find an audience, grow with their audience, and transcend decades of business. And they've seen things that some of us could never imagine. Some of us can, but they're still just giants. And at the end of the day, it comes down to pen and paper, the wands, the creativity, the spark, shall we say. The Ace of Clubs, Ace of Wands is that spark of creativity, that text message, that thought that encourages you to communicate something that you're thinking or feeling. You can do nothing, or you can enact with it, especially creatively. Creatively. I'm doing okay here for the audience listening, but if you are just tuning in, we are talking about artists, writers in particular, and just the journey. But I was saying before, I finished the short story yesterday, and the challenge of it being I locked in, and someone has had difficulty concentrating, particularly writing last couple of years. There was a period in my life I was able to write it, and I look back and I was like, how did you ever even write this? You just look, especially when it comes to motivation. Tavis has joined us. Hello, Tavis. Tavis and I were on Musings with Maddox. That will be on tonight as well at 9 o'clock. Tavis has been pretty cool with his Substack journey, and I've enjoyed following him. So today I'm talking about my journey in a roundabout type of way. We are talking about cardology, Bob Dylan, Stephen King, and just writing. But back to the short story. A frustrating thing, especially as a creative person, is when time passes by so long that you haven't put it to paper. Now, there could be ideas that you started and you're like, oh, wow, I'll finish that. And I've been doing that the last couple of weeks. I've noticed that there's plenty of things that I've done in bulk. And I was like, oh, I still had a few I never did. I don't know if it was the videos weren't performing or I just wasn't interested. And I thought, well, this is good content. I had such a difficult time putting it up. And when it came to writing, I kept thinking it's got to be perfect. This is going to be the Game of Thrones. And I had written a novella that I did a draft, we'll say a manuscript for a novella that I wrote for a very odd purpose. It was stuck in my head, and after I wrote it, I didn't really want to rework it or go back to it. If anything, I wanted to redo it. But it was stuck in my head, and everything I saw was so specific to what was going on in my life at that exact time that I couldn't relate to what I was writing. And in regards to with these club cards, Bob Dylan being 8 of clubs, Stephen King being 3 of clubs, the best way I've been able to come up, or best way I haven't done it, the best way I've seen for creatives would be Polka Dot Man in The Suicide Squad, directed by James Gunn, the second one. As he has to release these polka dots at some point in the day, otherwise it kills him. And I think the creativity for a lot of creatives, it has to come out of us, and we have to also be supported, but we have to channel it and learn to self-support ourselves and feel confident in our image, because not everyone's always going to be nice. Not everyone's always going to have the nicest things to say. Not everyone's going to have the nicest comments to have. They might throw our things right in the mud and say, this is what's wrong, everything wrong with civilization today, which if you have the effect to do that in your writing, I mean, that's pretty cool in itself. You got to kind of take the negative and turn it into a positive. Speaking of another club card, that would be the 7 of clubs, which is a very spiritual card. And it is between two worlds. It is 7, which is exactly halfway between the ace, which is 1, and 13. We are speaking of the 52 card deck, 53 if you include the Joker. I know there's 2, but 53 in the cardology system. The cardology system is the foundation of the tarot, whatever you want to call it, and something I've been looking so much into and seeing destiny, fate, but also learning more about people, which I think at the end of the day is why artists want to art. They want to communicate what they're thinking, feeling. Bruce Springsteen, he did a documentary for Apple, I don't know if Scorsese did it. Speaking of Scorsese, but I know he did it, and I remember I didn't finish it. I remember starting it, and he said he always wanted to learn it was something about communicating with people. That was kind of the goal of him producing songs, music, all that is he wants to communicate with people. And I think how I don't know if I'll ever meet the man. I've seen him. I've been within, shouting distance of him at a concert. He wasn't performing, but he was in the audience, and he eventually did get on stage, which is one of the coolest things, especially an impromptu concert you didn't expect to go to. Just awesome experience of seeing him get on stage and seeing him just be like everyone else because he's an artist. Very proud of his New Jersey heritage, and his career is so inspiring as well. I like his 70s work. He was especially his early work I like is probably my favorite. I love his second album, The Wild, the Innocent, the E Street Shuffle. It's probably the most fun he has ever. And he goes into a different direction, but that album, I think that's just Bruce still at his creative, just he's got his first album out of there and he's going somewhere else. And he communicated, and the saxophonist for the E Street Band, or the original saxophonist, the Clarence Clemens, one of my all-time favorite saxophonists, and how he kept coming up throughout my life when I didn't know it, because I thought I got into Bruce Springsteen maybe middle school, high school. Evidently, when I was a kid, Tavis, I think you'll appreciate this one. Home Alone 2 was one of those movies that I had taped off television, or I had a recorded version of it. And this thing was on repeat in my very tiny Magnavox TV VCR. And I would put this on repeat, and I used to have sleep tapes. One of the coolest things of having a TV VCR is there was a sleep timer, and it stopped the tape. Because if you had a VCR plugged into the TV, you can turn the TV on, off, but it could still record. That was one of those cool things that I don't think Gen Zers or after who don't know the VCR know that if you turn the TV off, as long as it was to the correct channel, theoretically it would record what was on the television. I remember finding this out for the first time and I was blown away. I thought it was so cool. And then certain times it wasn't. I don't know. But random. Getting back to Home Alone 2. The montage in that movie is my family's in Florida and I'm in New York, and he does that. There's a song that they play, All Alone on Christmas. It's by Darlene Love. And what's so crazy about this is basically an East Street Band song without Bruce Springsteen, but with Darlene Love as the lead singer. And they use classic musicians, and Clarence Clemens gives the coolest, best saxophone solo when they do the zoom in. And Kevin is actually on the World Trade Center, and it's this helicopter shot. And that saxophone just blaring, and then that wide shot of New York is just something it's always been ingrained in my mind. I love the song. It's very positive. It's a very good montage. And having been all alone on Christmas, having not been, but also having had that experience, it's a very touching song, especially like around the season. If you're in retail, it's a really good opportunity for at least if you liked each other, different times, coworkers, different eras. It was very cool. So, Darlene Love, at a certain point in my life, I've realized, I don't know, I think we try to segment it, or if we're trying to write a life in a documentary, we try to make sense of it. And for some reason, if I was to think of the first early years of my life, prior to going to school and all that, the best way I can say I saw the world was as he's seen maybe Field of Dreams or Bull Durham, maybe even uh, Dick Tracy. It's the lighting of those movies as this very specific late 80s, early to maybe mid 90s style of cinematography. And it had this very, I don't know, soft, diffused, don't know the exact words to describe it. I'm sure someone could help me or make fun of me for not knowing it, whichever. As long as you communicate the information. And positive, respectful way. So, communication with these songs, Darlene Love, they're my whole life, right? And then I realized during this golden glow period, other movies, Father of the Bride, Goodfellas, I don't know, this early 1990s period. And Darlene Love, 1990, 1991, 1992, she's in every single year. Goodfellas, I think it's Christmas. Clouds coming down, Chris. I think she's in a group with that one. The next year, 1991, we have the Father of the Bride remake. And there's the Today I Met the Boy I'm Gonna Marry montage. Still one of my favorite montages. It's hard not to cry, but I think it's a cool visual of fatherhood that I saw as a kid and getting older, looking back with nostalgia. That's kind of how it is. You know, you see it, you look back, and you talk to people from the past. And I think, if anything, with this creating, connecting as artists, we're trying to connect people with our pasts, tell our stories, and add to the lexicon of humanity in the weirdest, strangest way. We're all here at the same time. The world we were born into is no longer the world we live in, and the world that we leave won't be the world we're in now. It's a scary thought, and getting older has, has its consequences, obviously. But to somebody, it's always interesting to us to see someone that could see it from a wider scope. And that's getting back to the artists. At that point, Darlene Love was from the rock and roll era. The early 90s weren't that far off from the 1960s. It's where the 90s are from today. And if you said that to someone, that makes us sound crazy who grew up in that period. And time does pass, and then certain things just bring you back. And what I like so much about Dylan in particular is he revisits his songs. A lot of people revisit his songs. He's covered so many times by so many different people. And there's people always say, I can't stand his voice. He still has a following. He has the Nobel Prize. Not bragging for him. It's just these are interesting superlatives to have for an artist. He was an inspiration to Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix said, after hearing him, I knew I could sing. And I think that's one of the beauties of him sounding the way he sounds. Everyone's like, well, why does he sound like that? So many people sound better. So many people sound better, but they don't sound like him. He was around the same period as Elvis. Elvis had covered him. Elvis covered Bob Dylan, and there was a studio segment of him doing I Shall Be Released, which, if you know the song by The Band, it's a very beautiful song, and even Elvis just practicing it for a second, you could just imagine him hearing it. And artists communicating with artists, getting back to what Bruce Springsteen said, right? I'm getting there, a very roundabout way. Tavis, I feel like this is what we would talk about if we had a live. We would go from five different subjects all around. I keep moving my Bob Dylan cards because I have to remember to talk about them. One of my favorite songs is Like a Rolling Stone. That is a cliche song. It was the top song on the Rolling Stone 500 Greatest Songs. And when they announced that originally, I was cursing up and down. I thought it was so stupid. I thought it was lazy. I'm like, did they pick it because it had the name of the magazine in the title? What's so great about it? Who's this Bob Dylan guy? And this was youth, inexperience, no knowledge or respect for the past, just being a brash teenager. Fun. But when you re-encounter the same energy from someone with a smirk, you take a moment and try to appreciate where they're coming from. That's what I've learned. Just saying. But so like a Rolling Stone, and eventually kept listening to it. Then the amount of people that have covered the song, then having become a Rolling Stone in my own life, I felt like a Rolling Stone. If you follow Sappy's channel, you notice that Sappy says we don't talk about Sappy's father. Well, Sappy's father was a Rolling Stone, being the metaphor in this. He's a metaphor, very much like the song by the Temptations, and me being more like a simile. I am like a Rolling Stone, being like Bob Dylan. My father was a Rolling Stone, but I am like a Rolling Stone. I still have some time to get some moss. What was so great is Dylan's writing about these songs, and he may not even know what they mean at the time. Did he grow to understand what they meant later? Yes. I think he was a conduit, a channel. His card, the Eight of Clubs, is one of three fixed cards out of all 52. The cardology system, just to go into it very briefly, in case you're curious, is a way of breaking down the year into 52 cards like the system. There's actually a specific structure, and if you look up a day, there's a corresponding card, and it's actually universally agreed upon. It doesn't go in the way you would think of it, and there are certain days that have certain ways. But there are two spreads. There's a spread which goes in order, which is the divine way, how if nobody touched it, and then there's the mundane or the man-made spread, which involves our involvement in the greater plan. And the system is done through quadrating the cards, and then through the cards, you find yourself in the spiritual plane as well as the mundane plane. Now, where you are in the mundane plane has to do with a grid, and then there is a grid of two planetary axes. I know this sounds very complicated, but the more you study it, the more you're like, oh. And one of the things is you encounter all the cards through your life and you go through all the periods, and each of your periods there's different cards, there's vertical cards that can offset cards, and you learn to work within these energies, take away control. Certain cards have certain numbers, like jacks have certain meanings in certain suits, but the suits all have a knowledge. There's four suits for the four seasons of the year. There are in your thing, there's seven planets in addition to Earth not being one of them. There's seven planets, 7 days in the week. If you think of 52 cards, 5 plus 2 equals 7. 7 is just a divine number. It keeps coming up over and over again. 9 would be the other one. 9 is the highest number before reaching the double digits and before the court cards. And as a result, you're letting go of the trials and tribulations of cards 1 through 8 before you move on to 10. So there's different challenges if you have a 9 in your Saturn period in your third year. But anyway, all the cards, you have a certain card, so whatever your birthday is, that's the card. And there's a couple of books that could tell you personality, other stuff. You can also look it up. And from that, you see each quadration would change. So it goes from year 0 to 90, and I believe it resets because there's a wheel of 45 cards, and then of course the 7 cards that are fixed that aren't on the wheel. There's 3 fixed cards and then 4 semi-fixed cards. The 3 fixed cards are the King of Spades, meaning it's the same in both spreads. It will always be in the same exact position. It's very fixed. The Eight of Clubs, the card I mentioned that Bob Dylan had, as well as the Ace of Hearts. Fixed cards are always in the same place, no matter what the spread. Semi-fixed cards there's 2 pairs. They have a spot that they switch with every other year, and that's the only spot that they keep. Their spot, and then the slot they switch with. So these 4 cards, plus the 3 fixed cards, equal your 7. Just a quick cardology thing. I know I could probably do a whole series on it, and I want to be a little bit more confident in my presentation, as well as some of my comparisons, because I've done a series of movies and the tarot, because when I look at those images, I see scenes in movies. Very big fan of cinema. Cinema taught me storytelling. Storytelling is what humans do the best. Some of my favorite storytellers: Bob Dylan, Eight of Clubs, Stephen King, Three of Clubs. Clubs people. They tell good stories. We like storytellers. If you're familiar with the Marvel movies, not the Marvels, Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, the Eternals was a movie I saw once. Had an excellent experience watching. Hadn't had the desire to watch it again, but I liked it. And there was one of the Eternals or one of the characters. They were like man or human, whichever word they decide to use. I think human doesn't matter. Human decided humans' ability to tell stories is the species' greatest asset. And when we think of finance, healthcare, storytelling, entertainment is scoffed usually because it's inconsistent, it's crazy, but it is a very sacred position, and celebrities, even influencers, get a certain aura about them, maybe because that's creating a lifestyle we want, creating an image we want. Or they're just being themselves without being afraid. And that's what's so great about storytelling, communicating, and particularly, Bob Dylan. And Bob Dylan had a song. I'm sorry, I said the Ace of Hearts before. It was the Jack of Hearts. The Jack of Hearts is a fixed card. The song Rosemary Lily and the Jack of Hearts was a song by Bob Dylan. Had a huge influence on me. It was from his 70s album 1974 on the Blood on the Tracks. My novella was called Blood on the Pages, a little bit of an homage. I tried to do every single chapter as a song in the album. I think I got way too into the connection sometimes, and my insane way of setting up the structure and then filling in the gaps with writing is what took away from the whole experience, I would say. And I'd get fixed into specific arcs. For screenplays, there's the 3 act structure, or the witch hat, or the, it's been referred to as something else. I forgot. It escapes me right now. And you have to have your inciting incident 15 minutes. We did this in screenwriting class. We actually watched SpongeBob, and he said, well, SpongeBob's about 30 minutes block, 23 minutes. So it will be the 3 act structure condensed into 22 minutes, but we will go through our inciting incident. We will go through our plot point. We'll go through our midpoint. We will go through our plot point 2. It is not long enough to have either pinch 1 or pinch 2, so there's no necessary for that. And when you live in a world full of so many great filmmakers and artists, we're in a world 100 years, at least a century, has been for cinema, over a century. So that's good, but at the same time, we're still relatively in the infancy of this as an art form, which I know that's bizarre to think of, but we think of paintings going back hundreds of years, sculptures, thousands. Art has always been with humanity, and statues, sculptures, scribes, everything was to tell stories to help propel people to move forward. And another thing I just want to bring back to the cardology thing of why things connect so well is the 4 suits that I mentioned previously. The order, if you were to go from cards 1 to 52, and counting each for the numerical value of the card itself, aces being 1s, jacks being 11s, queens being 12s, and kings being 13s, you would come up with a total of 364. And then you would add the elusive 1 day a year Joker card, which is December 31st, which represents 1 1/4. Because the Joker represents everything plus a little bit more. And the Joker card is the only card, so if you were born on December 31st, that does not fit into the system at all because there is no predetermined life. The Joker just shows up. Very similar to the Fool in the Tarot. And finally, I think we're getting to the point. Bob Dylan, for me, certain artists, there's, I would say, I guess, a normal way of going through an artist's. I don't know if I ever did, and I'm almost positive I don't think I did everything what you're supposed to. I kind of self-taught in so many ways, but if you're getting into a new musical artist, the way you would think of it, or at least I would think of it, is if you had to go into a store and you had to pay money, I would want to get the greatest hits, most amount of songs, most compact price. Bob Dylan being around for so long, blah, blah, blah. There's so many choices in the compilation. Who made the compilation? When was it released? What was the masters? Etc., etc. But that's level one. Level two, you make it, you like it, maybe you buy Grace Hits Volume 2, maybe another compilation, but you decide to go look into the albums. Perhaps, depending on the compilation, you see one album stands out. You'll see that quite frequently in artists' albums, like Born in the USA. If for Bruce Springsteen, you'll see if it's a bigger compilation, you'll see a majority of that album represented. Thriller, usually the whole album is represented, with the exception of two songs. Girls Just Want to Have Fun. Genesis, Invisible Touch. Of course, I just picked four bands from the 80s, but that's just the easiest for me to go to. Big 80s fan. How'd you tell? Anyway, back to the Fool, the Joker card. Listening to music. So for Bob Dylan, I remember it was one of the Napster eras. I've since bought all the CDs, but during the Napster era, I would like to get a song, and then I'd kind of like to go through their discography. And then eventually, if I really did like them, I would purchase their albums. I'd buy box sets. I probably bought the album more times to apologize for my minor indiscretion of being a youth in the early 2000s. But I would download all the albums, and sometimes I would listen. I won't. It took me a while. I don't know why. Maybe it's a mental thing. I just had a hard time listening to albums all the way through. I had to be in a special zone, at least at this period of my life. Eventually, I just said, screw it, put it on. But I had an anxiety consuming art because I was afraid that if I wasn't in the right place, that the experience I have would be affected by it. And this may be taking it a little too seriously. When I was a physical media collector, I took my physical media a little too seriously. I am so fortunate to watch on TikTok, and I see people building their collections. I see people with collections bigger than I've ever had in my entire life. And I'm so thankful that they did it, because I don't think, when I stopped collecting, I was at a point where I was trying to condense and, if anything, come up with a uniform box, because all the different shapes of the boxes kind of upset me. I was adding more work for myself for no reason, and collecting itself was different than watching. Once again, back to the Joker. Why the Joker? The Joker just shows up. I just showed up here at 7. So I would go through albums, and I would just click randomly at songs. That was it. Sample. I wanted complete pre-shuffle. Now you use shuffle, but I would click it. And looking through all of Bob Dylan's albums, I've always liked the Joker. Grew up with the Batman '89 movie. So you see a song called Joker Man. Sure. It's also the first track. Sure. It's on an album called Infidels, and it looks almost like a budget album compilation. Sure. Happens to be one of my favorite albums of Bob Dylan, 1980s. Joker Man is a song that's come up in my life so many times, kind of like Rolling Stone. And the amount of covers I heard one from India. I'm not exactly sure what the exact language was, but it was on Dylan from Around the World, and couldn't understand it at all. But eventually, man, and I didn't know listening to this track. I think I had Apple Music at the time, and it was going through after you finish your playlist, because I like playlists. I have like that sense of control, of having control of your digital library. So actually having it, not that's a whole other debate. But the Joker Man danced by the Nightingale tune. Joker Man. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. The fool in the card is about to step off a cliff. He is going to be saved by the dog or something. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Leap of faith. He had to believe that the step was there, and he made the step. And that is a lot of times the fool. It's like going in the right direction. And the fool's journey is the fool's journey. The fool is the Joker card. The Joker card is every single one of the cards. That's why they don't have a set path in life. They could be any card at any time. They are not limited. And the Joker is December 31st. The Joker would take the throne and mock everyone because the Joker understands everyone. I saw the clown crying in the alleyway. Another Bob Dylan song from Hard Rain is Gonna Fall. Clowns crying. And clowns have been looked at in so many different ways. The Native Americans, I think the Sioux, have Heyoka, which I remember telling someone. I remember telling them the story, or no, they told me about it. I was really excited to hear about it. I remember them telling me about it. Years later, I was like, "Oh, thank you for introducing me to this concept." Like, I don't remember that. And then I told them, but they had told me. And this person, this wasn't old age. They just do not remember having this conversation with me, but they are the ones who told me about Heyoka, who lived their life on a different plane. I don't know. There's different ways. They had Heyoka empath, and sometimes the internet could do a lot of things with these concepts. Whether or not, I've always thought the concept of a Heyoka or the path is something I've noticed I followed along with, just how they go through life. And a crazy thing I saw maybe a couple of weeks ago was I saw someone walking backwards. Not that this is strange by any means, because it does work your calves very well. But Heyokas will walk backwards. They'll dress for winter and the summer, summer and the winter. They are a mirror for the world, for it to see themselves. And that's what artists do. Artists are clowns in a sense, although most people might not like being called a clown, because clowns are clowns. Not all of them are evil. Evil clowns have its own thing in society, and there's the phobia associated with it. Understandable, because it is a job of trust and stuff, and completely the opposite way. It's kind of similar like with Santa Claus slashers. It's a very interesting subgenre, but to a child of a certain age can be completely devastating and detrimental. So viewer discretion is advised, especially with that one has always been hard. Just I've seen too many movies when I shouldn't have at a young age, but children, I don't know if I would let them see the same things I did. Don't know. But anyway, so we're at the Fool card, and the Fool rushes in where angels fear to tread. Why is he doing this? Well, the Fool goes for it. Bob Dylan decides to leave Hibbing, Minnesota, and go to New York, and he recorded an album of mostly covers and a couple of original songs. Then he traveled the folk scene, and eventually he decided wanted to write different songs, so he wrote electric music, and this was very controversial. The movie, like a Complete Unknown, I get my Bob Dylan movies mixed up, there's a lot. A Complete Unknown covers his travels to New York in that period, which they've covered a lot, and missed opportunity was for them with the bootleg series, which they just had come out, which was songs from Bob's original band was the Jokers. So Joker caused him to start into it, and putting on a mask gave you the confidence. Does this give me the confidence? No, I've done this without makeup. Or I knew a guy that did it without makeup. Gotta keep it kayfabe, guys. Anyway, but yeah, the Bob Dylan tarot, what is so cool about it is his songs are translatable. Vampire Weekend. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the band. Some of you might be familiar with it. I don't know. I like music. I've said bands and gotten every single possible reaction you've can get. Sorry. Ugh. Oh. Really? Oh. Yes. So, whenever I say it, I don't know what to expect. I'm usually ready for an insult, but it's been a long time since I've gotten one of those. Hopefully. These rants. I need to have a sip. I've been talking uninterrupted for 46 minutes. Bob Dylan. Joker Man. So the Jokers, and his career went. So he went electric. He had another trilogy, and this is usually what studied the most. This period of Bob Dylan's life. This is the prophet, and the counterculture movement. A lot of times associates with himself, even though he was kind of out of it by a certain point. Dylan has its critics. I liked Dylan because he never really stayed the same. He was one of those artists who really demonstrated it through characters he's channeling. David Bowie did something similar if you follow his trajectory, and Prince did it as well. There's periods where you look back, and Bob Dylan's always been a very simple, like, I think he has a very basic setup. Just show up with a guitar, and a lot of times you hear the stories is he just starts playing music in these, and they just had to put the camera or put the microphone in the right place, and he would do the rest. And after he has this huge trilogy, he's kind of exhausted. He's done a tour in England, he's did another tour, had documentaries, and he's being projected as something that he doesn't even know that he's being. He's writing music. He's writing before his time. And he eventually has a motorcycle accident and he goes into retirement. And during this period, the Dylan fans, the era of great silence, depending on which Dylan documentary you watch. And Dylanologists are one of the most dedicated groups of researchers and intellectuals. And I love they just a very cool community, very welcoming. Just the older Swifties. I'm not making comparisons, but they are obsessed with an artist. That's the best way to say it. And the fact that we do have like a Bob Dylan tarot, like his music touched people to the point where someone's like, I'm going to do a tarot of this, and it actually doesn't work too bad. There are songs, like I was saying, Vampire Weekend. Sorry. Vampire Weekend did a wonderful cover of Joker Man. It's 10 minutes. There's a little break in the middle, but it's so fantastic, you know. Joker, just the way he sings it. If you listen to the David Letterman show in 1984, he does a completely unique version with a punk band, The Plugs, on the David Letterman show. Audio quality is not perfect, but the arrangement is completely different. It's a post-punk song and versus this slower reggae mythic song of this character. And then there's this one from Brazil, and it had drums. The name's escaping me. But Joker Man starts the tarot deck. Joker starts this, you know, sometimes acting like a fool or being afraid to be the fool is making that first leap, putting that page to the paper. And long story short, I will be publishing short stories upcoming. I've got one, I want to publish more, and working on a universe, but so much support from my Substack community here that I just want to do a live solo talk about some of my influences, rant about Bob Dylan, which obviously I can, for I don't want to, my oh no, my internet's unstable. Well, you know, we'll be happy it's just the internet. I'm having too much fun here. So one more thing before we go, because I don't know how big a fan. I speak a lot of physical media past. It's the only thing that I've saved from the music era. And a box set. Do an unbox.